Okay, so before we get started with the actual run itself, I want to go over a few basic concepts or basic things about the game. I'm running this in windowed mode, which you can usually do in the config file depending on the version you have, but on some versions of the game, like the Steam versions for instance, you have to go into the ini file and modify it to allow windowed mode. I'll assume you guys are resourceful enough to be able to use Google, so just go ahead and use that if you have the need to like run the game in windowed mode and don't have the config option to do so. Other than the game running, we also want the task manager to be open as well, so we can see how much memory the game is using, as the game has quite a bad memory leak. Or, sorry, that's not properly pronounced by me. The game has quite a bad memory leak. It's once it gets to around 1800 megabytes of usage, sometimes a bit higher, sometimes a bit lower, the game is going to crash, so we want to be sure that it doesn't do that. To counter this, a few times during the run we restart the program just to be certain that the game resets its used memory and doesn't like get to a completely ridiculous level, but generally speaking it's somewhat useful to have it running on the higher end of the used memory than the lower end. Around like 1000 megabytes of used memory is about the sweet spot, as it will let us save teleport a little bit, do a few glitches a lot easier than we would otherwise be able to. Let's see if there's anything else I want to go over. Oh yeah, options. That's pretty important. We run the game on easy and we time ourselves against the in-game time. Glassnunk has been so kind as to make a load remover for the game, which helps quite a bit, as we quick save and quick load a lot during this run, and if we had, if anyone had a different kind of hardware setup, it would impact the time quite a bit. Auto level is off. We want to be able to level up on our own. Mouse look is up to you. If you like it, by all means go ahead and use it. I'm not a fan of it myself, so I don't have it on myself, but it doesn't impact time whatsoever. Autosave should be on, trust me, even if it costs like an extra second or so, it's worth it. Always have this on. The game will still crash on occasion, randomly. There's not much we can do against that. Reverse mini game Y-axis is up to you, doesn't really matter. Combat movement you want on, because you want to be able to control your character. Mouse sensitivity and reverse buttons and all of that, that's up to you, doesn't matter too much. Movement I mostly just leave on default. In here, game is where a lot of the changes are though, or I have made a lot of changes myself. It doesn't really matter the specific hotkey setup you use, as long as you have easy access to a few specific options in the game, or a few specific menus in the game. Pause game is pretty important. I leave this on default, which is spacebar. Default action I think is also by default on E, but if it's not, E is really good for it. Activate, basically I leave the number keys just untouched. Doesn't really matter too much. Message screen doesn't matter. Map screen, you are going to be using this a few times, so you want to be sure it's mapped somewhere, but it's not super important. So I just leave it on default. Quest doesn't matter. Skills and feat doesn't specifically matter, but I do like to use it for a specific glitch. I have this bound to F2 and option screen, which is the normal escape key screen that you usually get, to F1. I'll explain that when we get to it. I'd recommend having the same setup if you'd, or something similar. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be on F1 or anything, it could be like an O and P, or like basically just any keys that are right next to each other. Character screen, you want to have close hand or like close by your movement keys. Inventory screen, you want to have close by your movement keys. Equipment, as the same. Cancel combat, you want to have bound to something, but you're not going to be using it that often. Just have it bound somewhere. I like to have character screen and equipment screen right next to each other on F and G. That makes one specific glitch relatively easy. The second screen doesn't really matter, but you still want equipment screen close by, so I just have them on those keys. Inventory is, again, you're going to be using that a lot, but it doesn't matter which specific key it is. Change leader is pretty important. You're going to be using that in quite a few areas of the game, so we'll definitely have this selected. or like have this bound to something. I'm pretty sure this is the default one, which is fine. Solo mode is important. Have this bound to something. We're not going to be using it often, but it is very important. Stealth doesn't matter. Flourish weapon doesn't matter. Tooltips again doesn't matter. Quick save and quick load are probably the most important hotkeys to have bound. I have mine on F3 and F4, so they're a little bit out of the way, so I won't hit them by accident, which can kill the run if you do that. Don't hit them by accident, but still have them close enough that you can like reach them in less than a second. Pretty important. The rest doesn't matter. Minigames up to personal preference doesn't really matter. Also pause, you want everything turned off. You wanna just pause the game when you want to, not when the game wants you to pause. So just turn everything off. Graphics doesn't matter, honestly. Actually, VSync kind of matters. The game can bug out on some versions as far as I know if you have it off. So I always leave it on. Everything else doesn't really matter. I also usually take this off just to not have my eyes bleed. Which is pretty good. Let's see if there's anything else. Grass and shadows can cost you a few frames per second, but it shouldn't cause any issues. If you like to have them on, just have them on. Oh, also brightness. I have mine set pretty high just so I can see stuff easier. I have somewhat bad eyesight, so but yeah, that doesn't really matter. Sound, again, doesn't matter. Personal preference. This doesn't matter. That's about it for the options. I don't know if I've mentioned this before, so I'm just going to mention it again, but you can run the game in windowed mode on most versions just by going into the config file in the main game folder and just changing it to being windowed. However, on the Steam version, you cannot. So you'd have to go into the ini folder or the ini file and change it there. If you need to find that out, just like go Google it. Just go Google it. It's on so many different sites and so many different forms that it should be pretty easy to find. Okay, so going into the actual game itself. The timer doesn't start just yet. Pick like any portrait you want. It doesn't matter. Female and male are all equally fast. I'm gonna be using Scoundrel because it lets us pick a few specific skills with higher, or like have a few specific skills at a higher level than otherwise we would be able to. It's very important with Scoundrel, otherwise we can't do a few sequence breaks later in the run. I should go over the attribute and why we get these specific ones now that I'm here anyways. We get 18 strength because we're going to be using melee for the most part, and this makes us deal more damage, it makes us hit harder, which is the same thing. It makes us hit more often. So have this maxed out. It's pretty important. Dexterity to 14 to give us a bit more defense, and to make us more likely to hit with grenades. Have Constitution up to 14. Wanna be certain that it's not too low, as we can otherwise get one shot, which is pretty bad. By like we can get one shot by about, like, I wanna say 4 or 5 enemies otherwise if we have it lower than this. We have Wisdom up to 10 because we want to have as high as a will save as possible. We get Treat Injury to level 2, Security to level 5, and Persuade to level 4. This lets us open doors, speak to some dudes, and just heal like 2 more hit points per med pack. For feats, we want to be using either Conditioning or Dueling. It doesn't matter which one you pick, just whichever one you feel most comfortable with. We're going to be taking the one that we don't pick here in the level 2 level up, so we're going to get both of them regardless. I get Conditioning first because it makes one certain menu that we're going to do a little bit into the run a bit easier for me. Press OK. Name does not matter at all. And timing starts as soon as you hit play. As soon as you get in here, you're gonna hit the quick save button as fast as possible, like 2 or 3 times, and then load your quick save. This is what's known as a save buffer. In this case, a hard buffer, being done a relatively safe way. Another way you can do this is by quick saving and then hitting the quick load button. It's slightly faster, I believe, but it also is a lot harder to hit. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend it as threat to a beginner, but if you want to save like maybe 1 second or so, or like maybe like 12 seconds in total during the entire run, you can do that. I'm not going to be doing it, but you can do that in pretty much all of the scenarios where I would be doing the doing this and going in and loading the quick save. Oh, another side thing I would like to mention: if you're running this game in Windows, be sure to have the task manager open, just so you can like monitor the game's memory usage to make sure it doesn't go above 1800, which is about where the game will crash. Whenever you do a quick save or quick load, the game builds up a little bit of memory usage, and if it goes above a certain point, the game just like explodes in and of itself and crashes and like corrupts your latest quick save, which is really bad. So if you have Windows enabled, be sure to have the task manager open, just to avoid having the game crash unnecessarily. Loot this. You can equip your clothes here if you want. I usually do. It looks a little bit nicer. Equip your short sword. Clothing doesn't matter. The short sword absolutely does matter. Be sure you have that equipped. Go over here and open this. And speak to Trask. So, one thing to note about going through most conversations here is we can just like select the default options. The fastest way of doing this is by clicking with the mouse and pressing numpad enter. As you can see, it's pretty fast. Otherwise it'd be a lot slower to get through these conversations. If you don't have a numpad, just go ahead and use the normal enter and click. It's relatively fast as well, or you could just use the 1 key as well. It's a bit slower, but it's still pretty damn fast. So once you get through this conversation, go to the equipment screen, switch to Task, equip a second blaster pistol, and exit. This will let Trask one-shot pretty much everybody on this entire first section of the game. Switch back to your main character and go over here. Unlock this, which will trigger a cutscene. Be sure not to skip this with save buffering. You can do it, but it will softlock the game, so don't do it. Mash through this. Be sure to start attacking, just press 1. This will bring your main character in motion. It's gonna move over to attack these Sith dudes. Then switch to Trask here. Queue up 2 attacks on each of these with Power Blast. And keep moving. If you get hit here like I just did, Trask is gonna speak to us and give us a medkit. It's not gonna cost us any real time, so don't worry too much about it. And open this door. These 2 guys over there have to be dead for this door to be able to open. Go in between this guy and this chest. This will usually mean that he is going to move out of the way a little bit this direction here. Then while he's doing that, open this footlocker and loot it. And there's gonna be 2 frag grenades that we need for certain parts later in the run. You can hit this guy if you want, it doesn't matter. Again, if you skip this cutscene, the game is gonna softlock, so don't do that. Right around here, when the Sith Trooper hits the floor, you wanna do a mouse movement, or use your mouse to do a movement input, and be sure to keep it held down until you get out of the cutscene, which will usually mean that the main character is going to move as soon as possible after you get out of the cutscene. It takes half a second, maybe. It's not important, it's just a nice little time save for basically no effort. Go over here, right around when you stand on this dude's corpse. Select the guy in the middle here, or be sure to pause the game while you're doing this, it makes this so much easier. Select the guy in the middle, throw a grenade. This usually kills all 3 dudes in the front here, which we need to kill for sure. If they don't die, switch to Trask, just have him shoot the few dudes, and while he's doing that, run up here. We need those 3 to die, otherwise this door's gonna be locked and we're not gonna be able to get through here. Again, don't skip this, it's gonna softlock the game, yada yada. Start mashing here. I press the left mouse button and 1 here. This usually brings the main character into like an attack pattern, which means that she's gonna keep moving over here until over to these dudes while we queue up attack with task, which saves us a bit of time. When we get over here, or like when we get done queuing up attacks with task, we're gonna switch back to the main character, loot this Jedi, and keep moving. When task kills these two, we wanna open the bridge here. This usually teleports task over here. I'm gonna attack these dudes from the main character to make sure she starts moving. Queue up attacks, switch back, and start moving over here. As soon as you get the level up, or like after you speak to task, it doesn't really matter. Just make sure to use it. Save your skill points, and get dueling or conditioning depending on which one you didn't get on the first level. Mash through this. Open this door, and before we even touch this door, we're gonna quick save, like this. Press the default option key, or the default use key, and load this quick save. This skips a relatively long cutscene with Darth Bandon, who is in here otherwise. And Trask gets to live for like another 2 seconds. Go into the starboard section. You might have noticed that I did an input there, or like you might have heard that I did an input with my mouse there. If you do like a little bit of mouse movement there just before card speaks to you, you can like move from here to about here, which saves about a second of future runtime. It's not important or anything, but it is a little bit of time you can save. Ignore this dude, he doesn't matter. Run over here. Ignore these dudes, they still don't matter. Loot this. Go to this security panel. It's faster to hack the security panel rather than the droid. 2 and then 3. This will kill all the Sith relatively fast. And then, as soon as that screen comes up, like ending sequence, you can click once to bring it down a little bit faster, like maybe half a second faster than normal. Open this door, go over here. Loot this guy, open this door, start mashing, and just leave. And that's the Endar Spire done. It's this first section of the game is actually pretty intense compared to the rest of the game. Like, you have to do about as much in the first like 2 or 3 minutes of the run as you have to do in the next 10. So like, don't worry too much if you have a bit of trouble getting this down. Just like practice it a few times and it should be relatively simple after that. Okay, so once you get into this conversation here, it's I mash with the left mouse button to skip dialogue, and I press 4, 3, 2, 5, and then 3. I think that's the fastest way of getting through this dialogue. Loot this locker over here for med packs and a few extra computer spikes, which we're gonna be that we're gonna be using to sell later. Go to this workbench, upgrade your prototype vibro blade with the vibration cell. Equip your combat suit for a bit extra defense, and your prototype vibro blade because it's actually a pretty strong weapon. So this is where I'm gonna end this section of the tutorial. I'm gonna be doing another one for the main Tara section and another one for the rest of the planets in order. Hopefully this has been useful, and yeah, that's about it. Good luck with the practice.